Welcome, guys, to the Experian Curated Couch at CES 2026. We're going to be talking about identity-driven audio strategies at scale. I'm Chris Meredith, head of sales side at Experian. I will pass it to my panelists to introduce themselves.
Yeah, thank you. Jason Fialkov, Vice President of Sales at Claritas.
Hi, thanks for having me. Leanne Nadeau, Chief Investment Officer at Digitas.
Brian Conlon, President of DAXUS.
Welcome, guys. Thank you for coming. Let's start with definitions. When you say identity-driven audio strategy, what does that actually mean in practice? And what's the minimum identity foundation needed to make audio a truly cross-channel for audio, CTV, display, etc.?
I'm happy to go first. So for our clients, we actually don't have an identity-driven audio strategy. I think it's antithetical to what we're trying to achieve when we talk about identity and audio. We have an audience strategy. And audio is finally caught up or is catching up in most places to be able to be a part of that full ecosystem. So I think if we're looking just at an audience-driven audio strategy, we're missing the bigger picture. We're missing the full network and system around how we reach consumers. So audio is especially late, I'd say, to the party in terms of the ability to add that into the full ecosystem and consumer journey. But for me, it's just one piece of that larger journey.
Yeah, I love that. Brian, as a audio-focused platform, what are the signals that you're using and focusing on to create a holistic journey?
Sure. I mean, I think anytime you can look at a publisher and get first-party data, that's always going to be the strongest signal for building out an audience profile. But with the growth of mobile ad IDs and IP addresses, you can really take that audio community now and actually build out true recognizable audiences, right? So I think when you ask your first question, and I think your answer is right on the money, I don't think we built out an identity-driven audio strategy as a market yet. But audio as a channel has always been looked at for incremental reach and efficiency, right? Because it was always the radio first audio approach. But with the growth of digital, we are now seeing addressable and recognizable audience listeners across streaming and podcasting. And how do brands now tap into that and kind of look at this across channel, right? So that way audio can get proper recognition in the overall media mix, because in the past, it always was one that you could just kind of throw away because it wasn't that same addressability you get in CTV and display that can be looked at holistically. But I definitely think that this will be the year we'll start to see more brands start to look at that approach holistically and give audio the proper recognition it deserves.
Yeah, I think the measurement piece is critical, right?
Sure.
It's using the identity to reach them and to choose who you reach, but it's also then the ability to tie that back to outcomes.
Absolutely. So when you think about measurement, Jason, at Claritas, how do you think about a audio to outcome measurement strategy? Where does a deterministic approach versus a probabilistic modeling, play?
Yeah, good tee up, Leanne. And I echo, Brian's sentiments that we think audio should be a part of your measurement and audience strategy within CTV and display, and look at it holistically. To your question, the goal is to have a deterministic methodology and approach. Right. Obviously, that's not always possible in an environment where there are cross-channel conversions, especially in international measurement. Sometimes you need to use probabilistic methodologies as part of that waterfall strategy and kind of next up in the waterfall. So at minimum, we like to have some kind of identifier that connects the conversion and the exposure, whether that's an IP address, a device ID, or something to link it back to a household in an identity graph. That's kind of what we need to get deterministic, but then probabilistic is super important as you look across channels and across the world.
So Leanne, I'm going to pass this question over to you. Audio is where time is spent. I know you're looking at a holistic strategy. Why do you feel like it's still so siloed today?
It's such a great question. I think audio fits in such an interesting space in the channel and investment mix. And I'll take a step back here and say that at Digitas, we've been maniacally focused on how we think about channels agnostic of their silos and buckets, because the reality is most things don't fit neatly in an audio or a search or a social bucket the way they used to. I mean, look at the way we consume audio today. I watch most of my podcasts on YouTube, or I have a complement to what I'm hearing on Spotify on my phone in the form of a display ad or a video. There's so much bleeding happening between channels. So for me, I think there's two reasons why audio has felt a little separate. One is the delay in catching up, like we've all discussed, in targetability, addressability, and measurement. And so I think we're finally at a place where we can get past that. But two, I think that audio is still falling into one section or one part of the pie chart in terms of channel mix. And we need to think about it as a social component, a video component, of course, an audio component. And so I think as we start to build an investment team at Digitas that is more channel agnostic and is thinking about designing experiences for consumers, we will see audio, as we call it, taking up a much bigger share of our budgets.
Sure. I mean, I think I would just piggyback off that and say, if you look at audio, and you kind of touched on it before, it really, the measurement will help catch this up, but audio is complementary to CTV and social, right? It's about having that consistent message, and that's what audio's always done well. It's been a brand builder, right? For people that are just trying to get their foot in the door for marketing. It was over-the-air radio, kind of having that consistent frequency and messaging so people get familiar with the brand. Then you build on top of that, and then you get into CTV and social and display to amplify that message. And I think now that we can catch up on the measurement piece, it will really allow for audio to get a proper seat in that mix, because as you mentioned, those lines are getting blurred more now than ever with especially the podcasting space, right? It was always an audio first format that's converting to video now, and those lines are getting blurred, but that audience is still the same. So I think it's how do we use the technology to deduplicate audiences across channels to make sure that you are driving incremental reach with your audio strategy, because it does provide great value there for brands in terms of that efficiency and reach play. And
is that the primary goal? Is it to like unlock incremental reach? Is it frequency control, sequencing, sales impact, all the above? Jason, what do you think?
I think the goal for us is to measure sales impact. At the end of the day, we're talking about sales and selling things using ads, but we can't ignore reach. And I think frequency and sequencing are tools to get to that balance of sales impact and reach.
Yeah, all of those things in service of driving business outcomes.
Yep, totally.
So as audio catches up, taking a look at like the long-term versus the low-hanging short-term fruit, what are some short-term wins that your team is focusing on at DAX, Brian, over the next couple months and quarters?
Our short-term wins are really going to be more just about providing measurement across all campaigns, right? We're looking to offer brand lift across every single audio campaign, which we announced yesterday, because at the end of the day, more dollars coming into the audio space just drives better results for everyone in the space, right? And I think it's about proving outcomes. I think that's the thing that people have always looked at as MMM models has been the staple for the industry for many years. And there's always going to be a challenge of audio getting a proper seat there. So it's about using the tools we have to our advantage, like our partners at Claritas and brand lift partners, to say, listen, in the short term, how do we prove audio's value in this marketing mix? And then how do we enhance the targeting capabilities on top of that to do that identity-based strategy across CTV and display? Because we've seen in the past that studies have come out where adding audio to a CTV campaign lifted performance by 30%. Like it does provide value there. And it's about kind of telling that message across the industry as a whole is really what we have to work on this year, especially at DAX. I think just kind of being the audio advocate and doing that education tour, because it's just going to take time, right? It's getting that muscle memory changed across the landscape.
Yeah, there's been an unfortunate, I think, for some of our clients, especially those I find actually in the food service, be it CPG or QSR space, where this concept of I need to be able to see it, to crave it, to want it. And that's one of the things that I think has been a barrier for audio. And because it's becoming so complemented by a CTV, a display, watching your podcast, I think it's opening the doors for clients who before have felt like they needed that visual component, but also the intimacy of the ear, I think, is something that can't be ignored. And we're talking a lot about that at Digitas. We're calling it share of ear, because it's so important to reach people in less distracted environments. Yeah. And so often audio is when you're driving. So you're focused on nothing but what you're hearing. Sure. Or when you're walking, when you're commuting, in these moments that are critical where you're often out of the home and ready to go make some sort of purchase. So that's taken some education for us, but I think the medium itself is unlocking new opportunity.
That makes a ton of sense. And then when we think about, you mentioned like all the lines are blurring, right? So what about sequencing that actually performs, right? Like once you're talking about, it's an audio and visual component, share of ear. How do you think about like that sequence from audio to display to CTV, or is there a sequencing that you like really focusing on?
I don't know that there's necessarily a sequencing. We haven't done any studies that would say, first you need to see it, then you need to hear it for some sort of outcome to happen. To me, it's the complement of the two that will expand your reach and expand your impact is what we see, less than like a sequencing journey. But I do think, depending upon the type of medium within audio, because of course it's not one type of format anymore, when you are out of the home driving that action and that moment, especially in like a QSR or a CPG or a retailer, we find that type of messaging does tend to work, especially when you're reaching people on the go.
Jason, what are you seeing? Is there a good next exposure after audio?
Absolutely. I don't think we have an easy answer to that. Kind of going back a little bit to what we can do today, we're seeing a lot of big brands that use media mix modeling, MMMs. They don't even count digital audio and give them a seat at the table because they're not getting the data in ways that they get the other channels that, like Leanne said, are more established, less far behind as audio is. So, one thing in the short term we're doing is actually pumping data feeds with fields that look like these big analytics companies are used to getting from other channels, so they can actually include digital audio in their MMMs and hopefully increase that spend.
I think just to go back to your initial question, I think sequencing is probably not the right answer in terms of going from audio to CTV, but I think we have to use audio at what it does best, right? And it's about that consistency and driving that consistent frequency in the channel, and then using CTV and display to do that high frequency impact takeover that drives conversions in that moment, but also have that consistent messaging with the brand, and that holistic strategy will pay dividends for brands in terms of that conversion and outcome side of things.
Makes a ton of sense. That leads me to the next question in terms of frequency and waste. What's the proper exposure and how do you avoid paying, for the same user multiple times over?
We use something called a FLIRF curve, a frequency to lift response function curve, in our dashboard that tells you the optimal frequency, whether you have to increase it or decrease it to get to that mix of, efficiency and reach.
Okay, so incremental, let's jump into incremental reach, right? So it's table stakes, outcomes is the goal. How are brands connecting exposure to outcomes? Sales, conversion, site activity, store journeys, whatever matters when audio is part of your overall strategy.
I mean, from my standpoint, I think this is something the industry has to solve for, and I think you talked about that omni-channel approach, but we still work in silos where you're looking at different attribution companies that are audio-focused attribution or CTV, and we need to figure out how do we holistically solve measurement across the entire campaign. And that's where the MMM models come into factor, but audio still doesn't get that proper seat, right? So I do think that identity-based audience strategy is crucial to really being successful in the long term, because it's about that deduplication across channels and making sure there is not waste, because you're gonna look at outcomes overall from a brand, but how do you make sure you're hitting that incremental consumer to drive more outcomes, right? You don't wanna be hitting that same person 5 different times, which is gonna result in one purchase. That's just waste from an ad dollar standpoint. So.
Yeah, I think my answer to this is similar to my answer to the audience question, where I think if you have an audio measurement strategy, you're probably doing it wrong. You need to be able to infuse audio into your larger measurement strategy. And that's why I love what you said, Jason, is you guys are not only able to measure audio, sure, but you're also able to help get audio in a format that allows it to be head-to-head in an MMM type model with other channels. And that's really the unlock to getting audio a seat at the table.
Totally. Claritas has taken the approach of including audio in our dashboard alongside CTV, alongside display. Because if you go with a audio-specific provider, you're gonna continue to be siloed.
Have you guys seen any proof points of when you've added audio to the mix and outcomes that have been performant?
Yeah, I think like some of the other answers, it's very different by client, but I can't think of an example where we've added audio to the mix and it hasn't been accretive to the overall buy.
I think it's by client, but I think from a holistic standpoint, you touched on it before about that intimacy of the audio experience. I think one thing we need to change as an industry is the statement I've heard for many years of audio's 30% of a consumer's day, but 5% of the ad dollars. And I don't think anyone ends their day saying, I spend too much time listening to a podcast today, right? People are usually tired of social media and just that overexposure there. Audio is something that they can't get enough of consumption. And it's about how do we shift the ad dollars there where people are actually leaned in. It's that one-to-one environment. They are front and center. They're in that car and that environment that they are listening and hearing the messaging versus that massive brand overhaul you're seeing in the other channels right now.
For so long, audio was measured in the old way that, click-based measurement, right? So we kind of pioneered the listen through conversion and gave audio proper credit.
So, as more and more companies and teams use AI and agents for planning, sequencing, and measurement, where are you seeing the biggest impacts and what are your trust levels currently?
From my standpoint, I think the trust levels are high. I think the technology is very sound now. I think it's not AI doing the entire end-to-end buying journey, but about giving information for you to make a human judgment on, right? So from a creative and brand strategy, it's about looking at the data, letting it do that analysis for you and see what's working, what's not working. And then at the end of the day, it's up for a human to take that data, make their best informed decision. Claritas has been a leader in the AI optimization tool, right? About looking at this is how you can improve your performance mid-campaign. Like that data was never available in the past. It was really up to humans to try and maneuver the campaign tactics to improve it. But you're now looking at data and using it to your advantage to drive better outcomes, which is what we all want at the end of the day. So.
Yeah, I think AI is too generic to a concept to give one answer
course,
to.
yeah.
There's what we're doing back of house, right? Are we using AI to automate the functions that we do as an agency? That could be planning. That could actually, now we're starting with the advent of AdCP to start to get into how we can buy in a more automated fashion. It also is how we measure, how we find optimizations. And then there's going so far as to say AI for generative capabilities around building creative that's going to be consumer facing. And I'd say on that spectrum from start to finish, I am the most confident in the first, and then I get the least confident as we get to the end. What we're focused on is not saying, hey, generative AI, go build our creative, and you know, we trust you. I don't think we'll ever be there as an industry, at least for large established brands. But what we're trying to figure out are what are the components we can use AI to do on the back end that make it faster, less expensive for brands, but also in a way that allows us permutation of assets in a scale we could never do before. That's where we're focused. But I think your point about human in the loop, we're nowhere near saying, you know, here you go, agent, you know, we trust you to go make this buy. We've got a long way to go to get there, and I don't know that we ever will be there. But I think the way we're doing it at Digitas, at least in a very calculated, measured fashion, is unlocking real value, but it's not there from a set it and forget it perspective.
At Claritas, from a workflow perspective, we're going through a pretty comprehensive training to use agentic AI for all of our work streams, which is pretty awesome, but I'll talk to you in a couple months when I finish it.
Sure.
From a product side, you know, I came to Claritas from the acquisition of Arts AI 2.5 years ago, and you know, as Brian said, we are looking at our platform as an optimization platform and using AI today to not only measure, but to optimize creative and audience based on performance.
All right, looking ahead, crystal ball, next 12 to 24 months, what will separate brands that unlock identity-driven audio at scale from those that keep treating it as a standalone?
I mean, from my standpoint, it's about brands leaning into that omni-channel approach Leanne touched on before. I think the measurement is there now. It's about just looking at how do you combine those channels into one holistic audience-based approach, because at the end of the day, that's your end goal as an advertiser and as an agency, is to reach that consumer regardless of where they're listening, right? I think it just, audio never had that proper seat at that table, but the technology's now caught up, and I think the brands that lean into that are gonna have the most success in terms of driving the most outcomes, because it helps provide a reduction of waste, right? I mean, that's the ultimate goal too, is making sure that you're hitting that incremental reach and not wasting ad dollars at the end of the day. So
Yeah, couldn't agree more. I think if you are a brand or an agency supporting a brand, I think number one, stop thinking about audio in a silo.
Right.
Recognize that it is actually multiple formats, and recognize the power it has in that share of ear. Two would be to make sure that we are thinking about the audience structure holistically. So it's not an audio specific audience strategy. It's not an audio specific creative strategy. It's how does everything we do appear in this space and show up in a way that drives outcomes. And then three, it's measurement. And that's so critical, because if we don't solve the measurement piece, arguably first, it's going to get dropped, even if we start to see increases in spend there.
Makes a ton of sense.
Totally agree. And I think to that point, Leanne, a big trend, as you hinted at before, is the increase of video consumption for podcasting, right? We spent a lot of time talking about how do you actually define a podcast, right? As podcasts are becoming videos. And the gap here is the large, you know, walled gardens that are video providers that I will not name don't let in third-party measurement. And so we hear all the time from our agency and you know, brands that if they did allow us to measure them like they do the rest of their media mix, they would invest more. So I encourage the industry to encourage our friends at these companies to, you know, work with the industry and to have some kind of standardization. I think they're starting to show some signs of willingness to work with us, and I think that should be, you know, a lot going on there in the next year to 18 months.
Amazing, thank you. I feel like I've learned a lot. Really appreciate having you guys all here. I know we have packed schedules, so thank you so much for your time, and have a great rest of CES.
yeah,
Thank you.
Thank you
guys.
for having us.
Thanks for having
Thank
us.
you.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys.